Welcome everyone, welcome to our students, industry representatives, alumni and staff, and welcome to our first spring session for this year on the exciting topic of localized fashion sustainability. I am Marie Sutherland, and I will be moderating this session. The purpose of this session is to address the logistics and constraints that retailers and suppliers are faced with to become more sustainable in their practices. For this session, we are going to be in discussion with industry experts Sarah Bueta, Laura Locke, Jessica Ramoshava, as well as Radwana Shank. Considering the topic of this session and our industry presenters, it is important to understand the Sustainable Development Goals, what is currently happening in the industry, and what are the factors that influence it, as well as how localization and digitization contributes towards achieving a sustainable fashion future. So to further create some context on the topic, I would like to share my presentation as the academic voice for this evening. But just to give a little bit of background on myself as well, I do have a BA Honours degree in fashion from Stadio School of Fashion with my thesis topic on sustainable supply chain through the integration of innovation technology. I also have experience in the industry, in retail and merchandising, and currently I'm a facilitator and module coordinator here at Stadio School of Fashion for subjects trend analysis and fashion writing and analysis. Right, so firstly, I would like to set the foundation for our session this evening by introducing some points of discussion. So we will be looking at sustainable development goals, current sustainability trends and development, localized sourcing and production, sustainable practices through digitization, and then I will be handing over to to our industry experts. All right. So what is Sustainable Development Goals? So the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as Global Goals, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030 all people enjoy peace and prosperity. And I think that quite links a lot with our 2030 master plan here at Stadio as well. But as part of these Sustainable Development Goals, we have 17 development goals that have been set out to achieve these sustainability traits, to recognize the action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability, meaning that these Sustainable Development Goals are built on 3 pillars, including social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And I think already some of our industry experts are nodding their heads and saying, yes, we can see this in our operations. So the 17 sustainable development goals are things like no poverty, zero hunger, food and health for all, quality education. I'm just going to mention a few: quality education, also looking at organic action, looking towards educating the industry, and just creating a better future and sustainable development future going forward. So I'm going to give you a moment to just visualize this beautiful and colorful Sustainable Development Goals picture here. And as we continue with our discussion throughout this evening, I want you to visualize these goals as we are going forward. What are we achieving? What can we achieve? What can we improve on as well? Right, so moving on, I'm going to touch on some current sustainability trends and developments. So we're already seeing that some of our brands are adopting the Sustainable Development Goals, like River Island, who introduced the Kind Society, which is built on the 3 pillars of the SDG, the social, economic, and environmental sustainability goals. There is a shift towards supporting local, which is one of our main topics for this evening. Recycled plastics also being questioned now as another greenwashing scheme, something interesting that might come up. Natural dye, so recyclone technology used to dye clothing with textile waste, and then macro trends also emerging, such as the design for longevity and carbon-free production. And then digitization as a strive towards a sustainable future, the Gen Z economy influencing brand development. And I do know that our industry experts have also been looking at how consumer behavior and demand is changing, how we adopt our sustainability traits. And then finally, the metaverse as a new world order. We've been seeing a lot of publications on how the metaverse can improve an ethical and eco-friendly environment. So just considering how that comes into sustainability as well. But of course, we have different factors that are influencing these developments and opportunities to take place. So I don't want to just categorize them as challenges, because they do lead into opportunities. So we have political and economic factors that influence us adopting sustainability traits like COVID-19, like recession, inflation, poverty, and unemployment, going into inequality and technological gaps. So technological factors need to be considered, going into our consumer demand that is ever changing, educating our society. So going into that social and cultural factors, and the biggest one of them all, climate change. Climate change driving that need to be more sustainable, that demand from our consumers, and then our brands trying to adopt more sustainable traits as well. And again, I'm just visualizing how everyone is nodding their heads and saying, yes, we can see this at this moment. We can see how this is influencing our change and our shift into sustainable traits. So a main focus for this evening's discussion is local sourcing and production. And in our recent Starter School of Fashion August newsletter, they actually touched on how we are trying to support proudly South Africans, and how our consumers are becoming proudly South African supporters, supporting that local sourcing and supporting brands that are really embracing our local small businesses, and trying to increase that and increase their support to our economy as well. But another thing that we can consider alongside localization is the digitization aspect. So sustainable digitization can be defined as the process of digitizing the economy in a long-lasting, green and organic way, enabling transitions to green and digital economy by building on its key strengths, innovative small, medium enterprises and their business ecosystems. So it further goes on to say smart technologies have got their application in socioeconomic, environmental, sustainable, and climate research applications to enhance the productivity and efficiency of given systems. So I'm almost getting this shift into, with digitization and sustainability, we achieve this through incorporating more innovative design and more green design into our sustainable operations. So I think it's clear that we are starting to see a shift towards sustainable fashion future for South Africa, but I would love to hear what our industry experts have to say based on the 3 questions that we will set forward to them in a moment. And with that, I will now introduce our first industry experts. But before I completely hand over to the experts, I will just shift my focus quickly to our chat box and see if anyone has any questions on the theory that we have discussed to set the foundation for this evening. As a reminder to the audience, if you do have a question, please post it in the chat box for us. Firstly, stating the speaker that you are addressing the question to, and then giving your question in the chat box, and I will attend to that at an appropriate time to our speakers as well. All right, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker this evening, Sarah Britza. If you can please just switch on your camera. And with Sarah, I'll also introduce Laura. And I'm seeing them as partners in crime, with them writing some amazing articles. Recently, the one on sustainability, achieving that with our brands as well, and also the workshop that you guys gave to the TFG group with the support of Stardew School of Fashion. So I'm excited to see that coming up as well. But firstly, I'll introduce Sarah to you guys. She is an advocate for achieving sustainable practices. She has her master's in sustainable fashion and creative industries, and she has experience in communication, business development, and project management in SMEs. So, Sarah, if I can just ask you to switch on your mic. If you want to add on to that background, you are welcome. And I just want to ask you to please share your sustainability journey this far.
Oh, wow. Well, hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here again, to be part with the Stadio team and chatting about such an important topic that I think we're all really passionate about. And we all feel that South Africa has a role to play in casting the sustainable fashion vision. So a little bit about me. I am very proudly South African myself, and my background is in communications, but really had a turning point a couple of years ago where I went to study fashion in Berlin with a focus on sustainable fashion and creative industries. And while I was there, I found myself getting increasingly frustrated that a lot of the discussion was from a very Eurocentric point of view, and didn't really account for what is in the global north, what does sustainability really look like? What does it feel like? As we know, that's where a large amount of the raw materials are being extracted out of, but also countries that are experiencing the impact of climate change the most significantly. I mean, with the floods in Pakistan last week, we're seeing it right now. So that led me to doing my research in South Africa, looking at my master's research, my master's thesis around, as we're talking about reinventing the local textile industry in South Africa, what could that look like if we integrate sustainability, or more specifically, the circular economy principles in that? So that also led me to establishing my relationship with Stadio, and we've been working together on workshops, educating retailers and design students around this, as education plays such a key role in where we're going. And then most recently I work a lot with Laura. That's my partner in crime as well. And we're doing some consultancy for designers and also retailers to help them on their sustainability journey. So that's a bit about me.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Then I'm going to hand over to your partner in crime, Laura Lonk. So Laura Lonk, if you can just please switch on your camera. So Laura Lonk is a fashion designer with a drive for ecological fashion. She has her master's in sustainable fashion and creative industries and a BA in fashion design. She also has experience in diverse range of projects from crafting products with slow fashion philosophy in small scale businesses to creating strategies in awakening eco-consciousness at the heart of fast-paced environments while working at a large corporation. So really seeing that passion coming through. Laura, can you please just add on to that background and share your sustainability journey this far?
Sure. So first of all, thank you. I'm very, very grateful to be here. And of course, as a non-South African, I feel like, of course, I'm in this journey right now with Sarah, which is very exciting. And I think my sustainability journey is very similar, but at the same time, starting with a very different background and beginning. So again, as you mentioned already, I'm a fashion designer. I am from Barcelona originally, and I'm based right now in Berlin. And I think as you mentioned, like I've been and explored different environments, different settings. I've seen different parts of this huge, massive, complex ecosystem of the fashion industry. I've seen the worst and the best, and of course, and I already see the challenges and the potential that it has for like change. And I think it was, from a design perspective, knowing that there's so much that we can do through design, via design. I wanted to explore, and I've been exploring this from a creative perspective, but because of the masters as well and the journey I'm right now with like retailers, and again sharing our knowledge with the world, with all the designers out there. It's just like, I think we're on this journey together. It's just like my journey, it's like our journey as an industry. That's why no matter I'm part of this conversation today, and I really want to hear from your like true South African perspective. I feel like I'm in this journey together, but definitely learning a lot. And I feel that it's about exchanging, is about true and meaningful collaboration. And again, I feel very, very grateful to be here. And I think it's just like we are learning. It's an iterative process, and still a lot of exciting things to come. But again, education and sharing, it has a very, very, very important part of what we're doing today.
Thanks, Laura. I think this creates a very exciting opportunity for us this evening to almost bring that global into our local perspective and achieving that sustainable design. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Laura, for joining this session this evening. I'm very excited for what you guys have to say and present to us. But next, I'm going to hand over to Jessica Ramoshava. Jessica, if I can just ask you to switch on your camera while I introduce you. So Jessica has also participated in a few of our panel discussions here at Stadio. It's very good to see you again, Jessica. So she is the founder and creative director of Aurora. She has a master's candidate with honors in fashion. And she has an experience in managing a local brand, which specializes in sustainable styling, boutique supporting, coaching, and educating functional wardrobe. Jessica, if you could switch on your mic and just add to that background and also just share your sustainability journey thus far.
Hi, Marie. Lovely to see you again. Hi, everyone. And I'm very excited to meet all the, beautiful ladies that you have on your panel. So thanks again. I feel like I need to just, I'm such a regular, I need to stop. Anyway, my sustainability journey, I'm a former fashion editor. I'm a fashion stylist. I started my career overseas. I worked in places like Dubai. I remember I was assisting there as a fashion assistant at Harper's Bazaar, Arabia, which was just like the nicest thing ever. I've started my career in London. I have a diploma in image and styling from Dublin, and eventually came back home and just started working for publications like True Love magazine, Forbes Africa. So I'm pretty much a hardcore magazine girl. But I also thought it was very interesting for someone like me who loves fashion to move towards sustainability, which I was introduced to that through my thesis when I was dealing with my supervisor. And from there onwards, I was hooked. My thesis was focusing on whether is a secondhand fashion sustainable, and I was trying to argue whether is it or not. And then fast forward, I'm doing my MA in pretty much focusing on the life cycle of a garment. Also just like very sustainability focused. But and I think my thesis, my research inspired Aurora, and I was interested in this whole idea about being a fashion editor, loving fashion. I'm one of the most unlikely people to start speaking about sustainability because, that's all we do. We shop and enjoy all the goodies. But I thought having Aurora as a consultant and a boutique, it would be very interesting to start changing the mindset of women and trying to, as someone who speaks the language of fashion, and just trying to transition them into a new reality of fashion. And so what we do at Aurora, we really just are working on a mindset and just showing them pretty much trying to have an impact through our wardrobes on how we can link that with the environment and sustainability. And that's what motivates us, and that's what we're on a mission on.
Thanks, Jessica. And I really love what you are saying and how that links to the Sustainable Development Goals of having that sustainable education. So educating people on that move towards sustainability. Thanks so much for being part of this session. I'm excited to hear your inputs later on as well. For now, I'm going to move on to our last speaker, Radwana Shank. Radwana, I can just ask you to switch on your camera. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you here to talk about creating better design and consumption. So Radwana is a consultant for SMMEs to move towards a circular economy, and the founder of creative agency called Greenstock Ideas, with a learning and knowledge platform called Ray of Green Sustainability, and launched a digital footwear design course, which I believe Radwana can give us some insights on a little bit later. And she also has experience in footwear and apparel industry for almost or over 10 years. Radwana, if you just want to add on to that background and share your sustainability journey.
Thank you very much, Marie. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. I really do think that it's so important to have these kind of discussions. So like you said, I'm a footwear designer at heart. I'm a creative girl. So my journey started off in fashion design, and then fashion media, and then finally I found footwear. My journey towards sustainability started about 2013. When I was working in China, and I realized that the waste that I was creating in the designs that I had made was being played with by children who lived around the factory. And that was sort of like this aha moment for me, where I thought, there's got to be a better way to create products that, because we're not going to stop needing it, right? And then I started implementing sustainability practices within my own consultancy. But then I discovered the circular economy, and I finally had, I guess, something a little bit more tangible than just saying, well, you've got to be able to create better designs. There's this whole idea around how your better designs can actually add to better business. For example, it enhances your business practice in some way. So I have been kind of gravitating towards a more more educational kind of outlook, as opposed to just helping brands develop product and design product for them, because I think it's wonderful to talk on LinkedIn and have 100,000 different articles to read about sustainability and about going green and about better practice. But at a grassroots level, it's very hard for designers who are working, or factory owners who are just trying to get product churned out of their factories, to think about sustainability. And that is where I come in, because I help them to make tiny little changes to systems, but starting from a design point of view, and help them to create a sort of like a chain reaction in their sustainability, in achieving their sustainability goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Radwana. That was so interesting, and I really resonate with what you are saying. And it's so interesting that you also focused on the footwear industry, as I know that there is quite a lot of product waste within that industry, and there's actually a lot of sustainability methods that we can implement through circular design as well. So I don't see any questions as of yet in the chat based on the background and your sustainability journeys thus far. So for now, I'm going to present our panelists with 3 probing questions, which we will be discussing throughout this session. So first of all, I'm going to have a glimpse over all 3. The first one is, what strategies can be implemented to achieve sustainability goals? Are there any emerging or disruptive business models to assist local value chain to become more sustainable? And then how can a business become more sustainable while it's keeping the bottom line in mind? So I'm going to again just restate or re-ask the first question, and then I will open it up to our panelists to discuss. So again, the first question is, what strategies can be implemented to achieve sustainability goals? And I think we can almost imagine those little colorful blocks in our minds right now on how we want to achieve these goals. And I would love to hear from our industry experts how their brands are currently achieving this. Radwana, I see you do have your hand up. Please, I do hand over to you. You can switch on your mic and share with us.
All right, thank you. So, I alluded to the circular economy in my intro, and I think that the circular economy is it started off as a buzzword a couple of years ago, right? But it's no longer a buzzword. And I think that if businesses were to think very hard about the opportunities that engaging in the circular economy actually offers them, that in itself is a strategy. I think that, while sustainability means, responsibly using the resources in a way that doesn't really affect the ability of future generations to take care of themselves, using those resources, it's a whole lot easier said than actually done and actioned. For example, if we think about value retailers, and we have a load of them in this country, right? They don't really think that maybe right now there's a hope of still remaining profitable whilst trying to be ecologically responsible. But I actually believe that value retailers are in a really great space to really trickle down better practice to their, quote unquote, unwitting consumers. If value-based consumers are not yet asking for sustainably made products because it's all about money right now, that's okay. The planet is still asking us to be better. And I think that value retailers, for instance, engaging in the practices and the principles of circular economy actually can make a difference to the way they run their business.
Thanks, Radwana. I definitely agree that we need to have a focus on that value-based consumer and also educate them on how that circular design can change this shift and be the strategy in achieving that sustainability goals. Laura, I see that you have your hand up next. I'll hand over to you. You can switch on your camera and mic if you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. So I really would like to continue with what Radwana was already mentioning, because I think, this is a very big question, right? And I think that it is always important to acknowledge that sustainability doesn't have just one dimension, like has multiple dimensions, and we need to look at them like in parallel. So I think also for me, and like that's a part of like the work that Sarah and I were doing, it's like, I think circularity, and again, of course, is a buzzword. It's been a buzzword, but it's much more tangible. It's much more measurable, and we see that through like sustainability, and they're like right now through like organizations like the El MacArthur Foundation that they're like setting out or are making accessible information for everyone, to have access to different dimensions of circularity, and also understanding what opportunities are out there in this space. I think we're going to see more and more innovation in this space. And again, sustainability out of these three big pillars that we already know, there's always room for misinterpretation. There's always room for I think if we want to move the needle forward, it's better to ask questions like, what goals are we trying to achieve? Again, going to the SDGs that you already mentioned earlier, but how can we align, like if we think of like, let's say like a retailer, so how can we align the values of the company? How can we align the pillars together with the SDGs in that sense? Or like, how can we look at what circularity or circular opportunities in the fashion space within circularity do we have right now in the context of like South Africa in that sense, like locally? Look at what strategies out there and what is actually feasible, because I think, and that's something that I really have learned a lot by working with like partners in South African partners, is that this one size fits all approach don't work. And it's better always to have this systemic mindset of going to the root cause of the problem and understanding what is exactly what we want to change, what is the problem, and then from there, look at all these beautiful, amazing strategies and things that are happening already now in this ecosystem, local ecosystem, instead of just copy pasting what is out there or what has been imposed from other countries. Again, very, very big question, but I do agree that there are more tangible solutions out there, and there are many different ways to talk about this question, which I think that all the panelists are going to take the lead on, after me. So, yeah.
Thanks, Laura. And I do think that's a very important point that you are making there. And I do see it linking in a lot with the sustainability development goals of educating the consumer and almost going back to asking the why. And there I agree with you, going back to the core, asking why is this happening, and then what can we do and how can we improve. And that's why I think innovative design also really comes in as a type of strategy to think how can we better improve on sustainable development. And like you said, not just being a buzzword and repeating what's already existing and producing something new. So Sarah, can I perhaps hand this question over to you?
Yeah, I've just been nodding my head in agreement. It's so wonderful I think we all have this passion for this conversation, and very much like has been said before, we need to be focusing on strategies that work within a South African context. And that I think what's so interesting is the work that Laura and I do sort of bridges being in a South African context within also being within Europe. And a lot of the knowledge of the circular economy in terms of repair or sharing goods has actually gone lost in sort of the global north. But it's something that's really still very much embedded in South Africa. It's within our local communities. It's within even the townships. It's something that's wide. It's there. We haven't lost that. And so part of the work that we've been doing and the dialogues we've been having is how do we build out this circular ecosystem? And when we talk to large scale retailers who have the resource and are very focused on things like the master plan and seeing how we integrate job creation in manufacturing, which is really important, but also thinking about the people that already are providing tailoring services, maybe in a township. How can we also work with those partners, integrate them into this broader ecosystem that perhaps they've never really been part of officially? And so I think we sit in a very exciting time of how can we apply this in our context and how can we create jobs. So we talk a lot about recycling as an opportunity. Obviously, recycling is not the end goal. It's really very much, well, it's not the primary focus. It's really very much an end of state consideration, but it does require, there's an opportunity for jobs in that through the sorting and collecting of these fibers before they get recycled. And I know we need to also build up recycling in South Africa. It's also part of very much a global issue that we have not got as much innovation in recycling as we need to cope with the textile waste. So very much we see some of the struggles here as well as in South Africa, but I think in reframing that mindset of what do we have already and how can we think about integrating this idea of repair or redesign of textile waste, because we've got some incredible designers in South Africa. We've got materials that are just being wasted, and how can we bring that in to what we are doing? So really reshifting that mindset.
Thanks, Sarah. That's actually so uplifting to just think about that we do have that platform and that foundation already to just build on achieving those sustainable development goals, and that we are also considering the consumer demand for thrifting and using that as a strategy to achieve this circular design, which I've been hearing across the panelists now as a key strategy for sustainable development, is that circular design and including that into our not only global environments, but also our local businesses as well. So with that, I want to hand over to our local brand. Jessica, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, share your video and just give it a go?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. I think that, it is a big question, and I agree with Laura, what she was saying earlier on. And I think I'm also agreeing with reinforcing what all the other ladies have said. But I think that I almost feel like you're hearing, when you hear the word strategy, you're just seeing, particularly in the fashion industry, like all businesses are trying to figure out the strategy of moving forward, strategies of what will work and testing and seeing, what is it that will officially get us there, And in my space, one of the things that I'm realizing that it's actually, underrated, and it's quite a huge and a very impactful, powerful tool, is really sharing knowledge, and sharing with the consumer, you'll be surprised how most women in my space, I deal a whole lot of women. You'll be surprised how most people don't know, or most people know, and we need to reinforce that. And I think that's what Sarah was talking about in terms of we are aware that Africa has been sustainable, but reinforcing some of the strengths that we've always had and keeping those, and then figuring out what is it where we are not strong at, and then moving forward. So it's almost as if like we have to find that fine balance between the two, that we shouldn't necessarily forget to validate, some of the work that we've done over centuries on our continent. So in my space, I'm seeing that through women's wardrobes, some of the things that they've just been like for years, whether it's been passed on through their mom or aunt or whatever, or whether it's a style or whether it's a garment, we want to keep those. We want to reinforce those, that they must keep wearing those. But in the same way, we're trying to impact the mindset that walking into a store now is a new day. You no longer shop the way you used to shop. You have to really consider deeply, what are your values and what do you stand for when it comes to your shopping habits, for example. And I think speaking about shopping habits is something as simple as, I think that will resonate with most people. But I think generally what I would like to reinforce is that the mindset of we have it. It's just a matter of, spending time and seeing how we can just streamline everything.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And I also now see how you guys are really integrating this mindset shift for our consumers to really focus on how they are going to buy, what they're buying. So again, asking that why question. So before I go ahead onto the next question, I do have a question for you, Jessica, in the chat box. But before I go to the questions, I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen so I can just really engage with our panelists. So if I can please just ask all the panelists to now switch on their cameras as we continue with our discussion. I think it's getting very interesting and enticing for our audience as well. But like I said, before I go on to the next question, Jessica, in the chat box, we have a question for you. So it comes from Anka. She said that you mentioned that you have quite a bit of experience in the styling industry. How has sustainability influenced your choices, and has it influenced your purchasing or styling choices, whether it's for your business or yourself? Jessica, you're still on mute there.
That always happens.
Yes.
I'll answer that question personally, and also just giving example of some of the women that I work with. But personally, I think that I haven't really changed much. I think being a fashion editor, and I don't know if there's people who love fashion as much as I do on the panel, and people who are watching us at home. You almost get to a space where you either like a real fashionista, or you just love fashion, but you're sticking to all the classics and enjoying your wardrobe, and almost having over the years how you prefer to wear things and shop things, whether you're shopping somewhere downtown Joburg or you're shopping somewhere at a flea market. Everybody has their own habits and norms, right? So I think I haven't really changed that much. I don't love fashion to a point where I shop every month. I love fashion in terms of I look for classics and I keep my stuff for forever. And I think I'm falling towards the hoarding kind of habit where I need to get rid of stuff. But I think what you see in most ladies that I work with, and I saw it even when I was working in the media space or publication spaces, that whole idea about we've been sharing trends over the years with women about this is the latest thing, this is what you should be wearing. And it was almost as if there was a time where it started going silent, where people were not necessarily interested in that. They were interested in, but not necessarily talk about, but almost in the sense that we don't know how to we don't know how to sell it, or we're not really interested.
Jessica, you breaking up there a bit. Perhaps just try to switch off your camera for a while while presenting.
All right. There you go. Can you, okay, I'm going to just go back just a little bit. So what I was saying was that we almost saw a shift when I was working in the media space about how women loved trends. And, you know, there will be spring, summer, autumn, whatever that were coming out on runway, and people wanted to just start buying and wearing this and all of that. But you started realizing, once I started working with women, you start realizing that actually people are not necessarily buying trends because they love trends. They're buying trends because they're trying to solve for the gap that they have in their wardrobes. They're trying to just almost want someone to teach them how to wear these clothes instead of having to go buy something else. Sure, yes, you're saying that I shouldn't be buying this latest jean, but I don't know how to style the old ones that are sitting in my wardrobe, you know? So you start seeing the gap of why people, almost as if why we started having this whole overconsumption, and we just want, and fixing this itch that we have. So that's what we're seeing at Faura, that women actually want to wear their stuff. And most women actually have a lot of clothes, and they don't necessarily are interested in shopping, particularly now with the inflation and how everything is so expensive. They're trying to find solutions of how can I still feel just as good with what I have, you know? So I'm hoping that answers Anchor.
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, for sure. So definitely considering looking at that gap from the consumer, what they want and what they need. But I also again saw that educational aspect coming through, and it brings me to one of the next questions from the audience to Radwana from Pietru. She said that, can you please share more about your drive to share circular and sustainability information with kids?
That was actually just something that I posted about on LinkedIn today. It's a little pet project of mine. So I've got a little 4-year-old, and she goes to a play school around the corner from me. And within my neighborhood, there's at least about 8 ECD centers. So there's a lot of them. And she came home with her nacho peels the other day, and I said to her, "Why are the nacho peels in your lunchbox?" And she says, "Because my teacher doesn't have a composter." So I said, oh, that was like a proud mom moment. I was like, oh my God, my baby knows about composters. So clearly what I'm doing is working. That's amazing. But it did get me thinking, because like the week prior to that, she'd come home with a party pack from school, and there was a balloon in there, and balloons are absolutely forbidden in my house. So I contacted the teacher and I said, do you understand why balloons are a bad idea for the environment? And she said, actually, I don't. Would you like to educate me? And I was like, in like the most respectful way and like the least facetious way that I can. But this is why balloons are a terrible idea. And it's not about taking the fun away from children. It's not about stealing their childhood away. But they won't have an adulthood if we don't stop with this nonsense right now. So this pet project of mine is literally just a handbook that I'm creating to distribute for free to the ECD centers around here. And I hope that it gets a good reception, and maybe I'll then open up the distribution to other ECD centers. But it's literally just a collection of little tips and pointers and tricks on how to teach children from the get-go what circularity is. Why is it important to compost, for example? You know, why don't we put banana peels in the dustbin, that sort of thing? Because you realize that if the education's not coming from the centers that the children spend the bulk of their day in, it's not coming from home either. By the time they get to primary school and they learn it in life orientation, and given the deficiency of the CAPS curriculum that we have, it's really not enough. So if we cement at least some of the principles at an ECD phase, we're winning by the time they get to primary level. So, and this, I'm inviting everyone here. I will share my LinkedIn. I think it maybe was shared on your page. If you can just pop in whatever tips you feel are necessary for children to have easy to understand, easy to disseminate to a teacher, that would be great, because there is also a really sort of like there's an educational deficit with the teachers themselves. And they don't know what they don't know. So they're not really looking for this information. I'm just going to give it to them.
Thanks, Radwana, and I think you do have the perfect audience here to give you tips and tricks. We're all willing to add onto that educational spectrum. But then before I again go to the next question, I'm going to pose this last question to Laura. This is from Jenna. So she said that there was a mention of the trickle-down distribution of information and education about sustainability. I think that the discussion about township brings into view the trickle-up distribution. So where or how do the needs of retail business and the consumer needs come together to create a mutually beneficial future?
Okay, so yeah, as Sarah already mentioned in the chat, I've very much researched and worked with the concept of like co-creating with consumers, but I feel there's so much value like this, and we've been seeing in the last couple of like well, more like last 10 years, this and globally, now I'm talking globally, like this massive trend towards like the makers movement. So I feel that there's very much a lot of value in it, and sometimes like these communities are like very much like sometimes online, sometimes offline, but I feel that there's so much value in like coming together and closer to the users. Like this, I think, and now I'm talking about like more like me as a designer, we often like put our ego first before the users, and I feel like there's so much value in learning new skills or like sharing the skills as a user or as a let's say a bigger retailer. So finding a way in which you can create these spaces in which designers and consumers or wearers like more make it, instead of like talking more like about consumption, more like wearing something, taking care of what you have. It's just like creating these spaces in which we can learn from each other. So either if it's a workshop, either if it's going to a tailor shop, or going even how to get rid of stains, like things that you know, this knowledge has been passed on via generations, that nowadays it feels like a designer, sometimes I do not even know how to get rid of certain stains, you know, as sometimes very simple things. So I feel that there's so much value in like through design or through sharing these skills, or like being in this makers movement, there's so much value of like truly collaborating instead of just like, you know, being in a website and choosing your favorite color. I think it's, you know, we will learn much more, and it's also another way to break this silo mindset in the industry, like truly coming together instead of not knowing where things come from, not knowing why is it better to wear this fiber or another fiber. Sorry. So the conversation could keep on and on, but I think it's just like bridging up these gaps and coming together, truly together, and in a smaller environment and closer. We can, you know, think globally but still be very much locally. So that's very important.
Thanks, Laura. So what I'm almost getting from all of you, which is quite interesting if we reflect back onto our first question about strategies to achieve sustainability goals, it's clear that there are two very prominent strategies across your fields, and that is achieving that circular design within our supply chain systems, production, sourcing, consumption, and also then the educational strategy of changing the mindset of the industry, of all the stakeholders involved. So with that, I would like to open up the next question to you guys, which are there any emerging or disruptive business models to assist local value chains to become more sustainable? So whoever would like to take this question first is welcome to just raise their hand and I'll give over to you. Okay, Radwana, you're welcome to take the lead.
Thanks. So I think that by now we must all be quite familiar with the rental model, the remanufacturing, you know, all the re's. And I think that those are really great. Product as a service is really, really interesting. And we've been seeing an upsurge in businesses like this. And I don't yet think that there's there's like four major models within the circular economy space right now that are doing quite well. But I do also think that we need to be very cognizant of the law of unintended consequences when it comes to remodeling a business. You know, there's, for example, if we think about the explosion of thrifting and resale, right? And you know, if it meant that we were wearing our clothes 64% less frequently than we were like at least like 10, 15 years ago, we're now wearing it even less than that because we now have a sort of, you know, ethical way of getting rid of our waste, of our clothing. But it also means that we can be a little bit more, what's the word, less discerning about how quickly we churn through our cupboards. And this is, I mean, there's a plethora of resale platforms right now. And just in fact, before this particular call, I was on one on Facebook, and someone literally had a haul from Shane. I hate Shane. I just want to put it out there. But had a haul from them, literally sealed bags going, oh, these are used clothing and I'd like to sell it. I'm destashing. And I was like, if this is what resale means, then we're doing it wrong. You know, and then we've got like the idea, for example, of I mean, you know, like for every solution that we come up with, we've got to project as far and as wide as possible. Look, no one can know everything, but we've got to be able to try and find the holes in the system before those holes leak, as much as we have leakages now, and try and stop that before it happens. So I'm all for figuring out different business modeling with, you know, trying to challenge traditionalism, but I am very, very firmly against creating more problems just because, for the sake of appearances, you need to change your business model. I'm really, really, really against that.
Thanks, Radwana. I think that's a very important point, almost thinking about that thrifting at this point, yes, it is a solution or a model that we can adopt as brands, but it's still linked to a fast fashion movement. Like that example you gave with the Shein. I mean, you still bought onto fast fashion and now you're trying to thrift that fast fashion. We need to look at that gap of linking the thrifting with the slow fashion movement as well. And then I think the problem comes in with local brands trying to also, they reflect on what global brands are doing and trying to adopt what global are doing. So the problem lies with global. So in order, I think, for our models in our local environments to also change, adapt to that change, is to start with global, so it kind of reflects and trickles through to our local markets. I don't know if you
I just have something else to add to what I was saying. And, you know, I think that, for example, if a business is considering a rental model, then things really has to change in your design phase, in your materialization phase, because if you're asking for extended usage of a product, there is no way on this green earth that you can make it the way it is currently being made. Because if it falls apart after 3 washes, then you've lost all the value and there is no way you can recoup that. So in changing the business modeling as well, you have to understand that it's a systems change that, like I alluded to in the beginning, it changes with design. It starts there.
Thanks, Radwana. I see Sarah is nodding a lot. Sarah, can I hand over to you to share?
No, I love everything that's just been said. It's kind of like, yes, because we do jump on these models like this is a solution. But I think there was an article in Vogue Business that came out, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, and just was saying that everyone's running to secondhand platforms now to consume, that we haven't actually fundamentally got out of this cycle of why do we consume. And I think that this kind of goes back to, I think we all love clothes, so that's why we're here. We you know, and when you're in sustainability, I think you also really have to constantly evaluate why do you love clothes. And it's fashion and psychology and the way we feel about ourselves, and it's so hardwired, and we kind of have to almost decouple that. And I don't yet know how we do that. One of the areas that we're quite interested in is behavioral change and how to navigate sustainable consumption through some design strategies like design for emotional durability. So the idea that products can grow with sentiment over years and time and they still change, but we have that attachment. And I think that's a really exciting space and an emerging one. But yeah, I think it's, as much as I have all my notes prepared to talk about rental and the issues with rental, because that's also quite untested, that's still very extractive. There's issues with durability of that product. Same thing with thrift. And I think we're in a moment of time where it is very exciting to get excited about all these models, but also I think the root conversation is also consumption, and how do we do things more mindfully, and what is the shift that we can start making in consumers as well. And as educators, or asking these very challenging questions, it's really important. And I think also when we're talking in the work that we've done with retailers is we talk to them about circular ecosystems and all of that, but the fundamental is we have to produce less things, and no one quite wants to have to tell them that actually we have to produce less, and that's uncomfortable. So I don't know, maybe I'm not going around the long conversation there, but there's all of these things that need to be considered.
Thanks, Sarah. Before I go over to Jessica, I just have a question for you, Sarah. So you spoke a lot about the consumer and the consumer also having that demand. Do you think that local consumers in South Africa, for example, do you have that mindset already of demanding less, buying less?
I think one of the things that serves South Africa so well and is this idea of local and the importance of supporting our local suppliers or our local designers. I've lived all over the world, and I have not seen the same attitude in the UK or in Germany, or I think even in Spain, Laura. I think that's something that really is a great strength of ours. And I think about so many amazing slow businesses that are using our natural fibers or advocating for linen and cotton, and you know, we do that very well. But I also at the same time saw on Twig last week, we were talking to people who buy from Shein and why are we buying from Shein? And as much as we have local, we have people buying from Shein. And so I don't know the answer to that, but I've seen both sides of it. So I think it exists within us as well.
No, thanks, Sarah. That's actually what I wanted to kind of touch on, seeing if there's really this balance, where are we as a local community? Because we see a lot of TikToks being made by South African consumers buying Shein, doing a Shein haul. So we need to, like you guys have mentioned, educate our consumers to make that mindset shift to be majority supporting that circular and buying less design. But as our local brand, Jessica, I would like to hand over to you.
Yeah, I almost wanted to speak for the consumer from a point of view of saying that, and I mean, I don't have the answer, but I just wanted to put it out there as we're chatting about thrifting and this new model, you know, of rental and all of those things. I think it's important that we recognize the fact that most people who are shopping, they're not shopping from a sustainable lens. You know, they're shopping because they enjoy clothes, because they, you know, I see how often, and I will speak to some of our community, and there's so many things like loud bulb moments where they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, really? Oh, how is that possible? You know what I mean? So I think it's easy to then, for us, because we have the knowledge, then to almost look at that model and say, but how, there's no way it can work, or there's no way, you know, thrifting is just, we need to fix it from the back, you know, to the front. But like an average South African consumer, they shop because they want clothes. They shop because they love shopping. They shop because they don't know that there's sustainability, or they know and they don't care, you know. Or another thing is that theory about if you're going to almost like expect people to do better, then you need to give them a better option, you know. And currently we're experiencing that in the market, in the sense that we don't have a whole lot of sustainable brands, so there's not really an option. So I will stick to what I know, and I will stick to where I prefer to go, because it has worked for me for all these years, you know. So I just wanted to put it out there that in our space, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing women who enjoy fashion, fashionistas, and they love it. And it's almost as if like, give me an alternative, then I'll go. But don't make my alternative be linen and all cream. I'm not interested in looking all earthy and whatever. I want to look fashion. I love fashion, you know. And that's where the challenge is. And I think sometimes us as experts in sustainability, because we are so into it, we forget how when you're in that space, you're like, no, I'm not looking beige. It's not going to work, you know? So that's not good enough for me to shift. And until that happens, I will shift. And that's what we do at Fawura. We're trying to change that whole mindset through environmental sustainable fashion, to say, you know, this is how you can do it. And I feel like having that lens of fashion and understanding how deeply people are attached to their fashion, we need to give them like almost like fashionable options.
Thanks, Jessica. I think you actually gave some great insights into answering our questions. So the model almost being based on the consumer, listening to the consumer, and the consumer driving the local value chains to become more sustainable. Thanks for that. Laura, yes, I'll hand over to you now.
Yeah, I just wanted, to add into this conversation the fact that also I think it's not only the consumer. I think, I think we tend to point at consumers because, but I think at the same time, it's just like a double-edged sword. I also think that on the other side of the spectrum, we also have the trends, the seasons constantly changing, like the industry as a whole, like feeding the consumers for like newness, So again, talking and adding more into this like change of mindset, I think that there's a big part that it's about us us as wearers, us, like, again, of course, like as consumers, but like understanding that we have to change, or we should change our appetite for newness. What does newness means? Because then when we think of like design practices like upcycling, which has been very much, as so far as I've seen firsthand in South Africa, like it is a practice that, yes, now we call it upcycling, but it's been there for ages. It's for some people might be still seen as, oh, this is not new. This is, it is just say so. It's a way of like taking the old and like transforming it. I think it's just like we need to understand or just like regain this appreciation for like clothes in a very different way. And again, not just blaming the consumer, because it's just, again, it's a work that needs to be done in very different spaces. Like, again, working with retailers, everyone needs to be educated or like understanding, and like also, which I think is something that I'm very much into it, very passionate about, is having access to information. So nowadays we live in a very interconnected world. I think it's much easier for like everyone in different countries like to have access to information, but it's still, you have to be willing, or you have to be, there needs to be a spark of something that really helps you to, okay, I want to know more about this, because as Jess was mentioning, some people might not care. Some people can happen in South Africa, and I've seen this again in my home country in Spain, or even right now in Germany, which are very much at the forefront of recycling and all the different innovative solutions. Still very much, there's some patterns that are still happening everywhere. And some people might not be wanted to change, or might change once they, get to know how things can be done in a different way. So it's just not about pointing consumers. I think it's much broader.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Laura. I saw Radwana had her hand up. Would you like to add on to what Laura said?
I was going to, and then Laura kind of made my point for me, but maybe I will add to it now because you called me out on it. But, consumers consume because they've been taught to consume. We didn't wake up one day and become ravenous and decide that we needed all of the things. And I think that what I had said a little bit earlier about value-based retailers making the most amount of change is, I think, quite relevant to this part of the conversation. Because when you think about sustainability, I really don't like the word sustainability. It's very much a buzzword, and it annoys me. But for the sake of this conversation, I'll use it, right? When we think about clothing that are made with sustainability in mind, we're automatically thinking of T-shirts that cost 800 or 900 Rand. For the average South African, that is absolutely impossible to actually achieve, right? But I do believe that we can get to a point in time where clothing that is made with sustainability in mind doesn't necessarily have to be bleated about. The way it's currently being bleated about now. No one talks about what is going into clothing now because everyone knows that it's all just crap, right? But we get to a point where it becomes so, we reach critical mass, and it's no longer something that's a value add. It's no longer something that's a USP. It just becomes normalized. I am literally living for that particular moment where I can walk into a store and I know that the 200 rand, okay, fine, I'm literally just giving a random number here. The 200 rand that I'm going to be paying for whatever it is I'm going to be buying is going to somebody that is being paid fair. You know, the garment's made with good practices. It's very, very, very near short. So that's why it costs me so little. That's the kind of ideal that we need to stretch toward. You know, we've got marvelous initiatives from the DTI. We've got the Sustainable Cotton Cluster. We've got the master plan that's supposed to be doing amazing things. And I want to be able to see that those metrics that they've set out for themselves have actually been met. Because once we get retailers like Mr. Price and Ackermans and Jet and Pep and all of these guys who are value-based retailers to change their systems around completely, we're winning, because the bulk of South Africans are the ones who are buying from these places, and they're not necessarily buying because it has a sustainability story. They're buying because it's affordable, but those are the problematic products, right? So it's a little bit contrary, but there's my 5 cents.
Thanks, Radwana. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat box here to see if we're getting any questions in, but I can definitely see from your replies and your discussions and linking to our second question, models that we can definitely think about is that mindset of the consumer, and then what you've just said, Radwana, which is very important, is that value-based aspect of our retailers, that change that we need to see. And I can see that here in the chat box, we have a lot of support with your argument, Radwana. And I'm just seeing if we have a question here in the chat box for you guys before we move along to the next question. But I'm going to read out. I'm sorry, Sarah, you can go ahead.
I was just going to jump on that question there. I completely agree that we also need to see big retailers change their practices, and we haven't touched on the importance of policy, and policy that can create incentives for, you know, not putting crap on our bodies, all of that kind of thing. But also, I don't know if everyone's aware that H&M are currently in the process of being sued for their greenwashing claims in America, and I'm really interested to see what will happen with that, because no large fashion brand has really been held to account for what they've said in the same sort of way. And I think that that can start really having to hold these big labels to account in a way that we've not seen, because there's no real, if they get fined, they just pay the fine. But what could this now mean if we actually are holding businesses to account? And if, you know, we're talking sort of in Europe, there's the EU textile strategy that is going to be incoming with some severe financial consequences for retailers and suppliers if they don't abide by this strategy. So I think it's both, yes, we need to work with consumers, we need to work with retailers, but we also need legislation and policy to make it happen, because as long as polyester is cheaper than any natural fiber, people are going to be using virgin polyester. So it's the end of the discussion, really, in that regard.
Thanks, Sarah. Actually, I was wondering if that was going to come up in this discussion with the H&M business happening there, because it is quite a big discussion that we can continue on and say a lot about, because even my students are really intrigued by this, and they do have questions regarding sustainability traits and the authenticity of it coming from brands and the transparency as well. Radwana, I'm going to hand over to you for a last peek in before I go to the next
5 seconds.
question.
I'm literally going to take 5 seconds. Sarah, I love your point about, so polyester has had an 80-year head start to any new material that we can ever think about right now. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was very pie in the sky, and I just wanted to dump it in here as a provocation. The gentleman who was a guest on this podcast was some big wig at Neiman Marcus, who had said that it would be so interesting if governments would legislate to make polyester more expensive, on par with like fair trade cotton or hemp or bamboo, whatever, and then see what happens to the market, because now the playing field is leveled. Right now, buyers make decisions based purely on price. But what happens if that wasn't a factor?
No, definitely, Radwana. I actually had to quickly share from our student sides as well to bring that academic with industry perspective. A lot of our students now in their trend forecast were actually saying that they want retailers to have those laws and have those legislations on implementing sustainability, but not just saying, like you said, the buzzword of sustainability. How are they actually going to do this? Is it going to be through localization? Is it going to be through digitization? What is the legislation going to be? How's it going to limit and influence the retailers as well? And with that, guys, I'm going to go on to our next question. I'm loving the discussion that is running here. So the last question, guys, is how can a business become more sustainable while it's keeping the bottom line in mind? So Sarah, I see again you nodding quite a bit. So can I perhaps give that question over to you?
Oh no, I got caught up because it was a question I was thinking a lot to myself, because we can go down the conversation around why circular business models could be good, and we can have that conversation with it. But I think this notion of success or profitable, I mean, we all want to run profitable businesses, and sustainability, you know, we talk about, it's also economic. So it's about, there's no problem making money. We want to make money, but we want to pay people fairly, and we don't want to destroy the future of our planet to do that. So profit is a good thing, but what does that look like? But I also think when we talk about this profitability and the work that Laura and I have seen and the conversations around how do we redefine that, is also thinking about what does success look like. And if we're basing it on sales volumes, but we're talking about integrating something in rental or resale, it's not going to look like it looked before. And so I think that mindset has to shift, or sustainability maturity is something what we talk about, is kind of understanding that sustainability is not just about recycled polyester or using a bit of organic cotton, but it kind of rethinking how it shapes the entire business model. And I don't yet feel, even in the whole industry, in the industry as a whole, at big levels, that we're having that conversation yet. I think there's a lot of shirking from that, and so we also need to think about how our supply chains are set up, because they're set up to be linear, so the take, make, waste, dispose of, and that's again how we run business as usual. But if we really want to have this circular textile industry, that we have this recirculation of resources, nothing goes to waste, it means that it's interactive supply chains, it's redesigning who we work with and who we partner, who in the ecosystem. And so we're trying to educate on that. That's talking about the broader context, but I don't feel business is there yet. So that's my 2 cents of the conversation. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks, because it's a very big question to answer.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think it does make us think a little bit that we've spoken a lot about the consumer's mindset shift. But your answer to this question almost made me think that we need to consider the mindset of management in retailers. The management in retailers has to take that step into, like Radwana said, achieving that value-based business and being a value-based retailer as well. So the mindset almost being there as well. Is there anyone that would like to take over from Sarah on this question? Radwana, there we go. I'll hand it
Jessica's
over.
hand was up. I'm going to give it over to Jessica, and then I'll go after her.
You go first.
Okay. All right. This is such a loaded question, because we live in a capitalist society. Like, it's all about the money. And every time you fiddle with the money, you're going to get blocks like everywhere. Like it is crazy. The gatekeepers will shut you down every single time. So, I guess like on a higher sort of level of thinking, it is going to mean a complete and utter thinking change. You're going to have to learn how to operate outside of what you know as a capitalist society, right? This could look like engaging in methods of allowing your employees to have some kind of stewardship within your brand, because it doesn't always have to look like, you're using cotton or you're using bamboo, but it also could mean that your people are paid a wonderful salary, you know. It could look like something like that. But you know, I think that when we talk about the different business models that are open, if you wanted to try a tiny little business modeling change within your company, maybe the lowest hanging fruit would be something like a remanufacture option. So I like what Sarah was saying, and it's very high level. And I want to talk more to, like, if you're faced with this problem right now, what's the lowest hanging fruit that you can pick? And I would think something like adding a repair option to your business, especially within footwear. I think in SA we're struggling with the idea of footwear being repairable. I mean, we've got cobblers, but they mainly do things like fellies and boots because those are easily repairable. But if we tweak very minor things in the design phase of footwear designing, those shoes become repairable. And remanufacture is a great way to recall your resources, the money that you've put into the materials that you use. And let's face it, as a country, we consume too much synthetic materials. We're not at the point of textile fiber to fiber recycling. We're not at the point of chemical recycling. We're nowhere near there. So those are like very sort of like maybe 5 to 10 year goals that we can get to. But in the interim, we still have a synthetic problem. So what are we doing with the tons of synthetics that we have? Easy win would be to have remanufacturing programs run with the factories that you're currently using in SA, and create something new. And I'm not talking about touristy crap. I'm talking about create something functional. Like, I really love the idea of Patagonia's remade thing. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but them getting back their resources and turning it into something that customers still want. It doesn't look granola, Jessica. It looks really great. So, you know, I mean, that's about keeping your resources in the loop. So for me, I think that's an easy win.
Thanks, Radwana. I'm going to hand over to Jessica now.
I mean, I'm going to stay away from the granola comment because Radwana and I are not going to finish. But I receive it. But anyway, and I wanted to say, yes, I agree with all the ladies. It's such a big question, you know, but I've been very fascinated with, you know, purpose-driven businesses. And I think, you know, we are almost, you know, there's always a new era for everything, right? So, and I feel like we're getting into that way. Your business needs to have a bigger purpose. Your business needs to, and I guess now the bigger purpose will be like the planet and global warming, you know, that is like the cool kids. But so the bigger purpose in terms of what do you do? What else besides, you know, the fact that you make tires, or besides the fact that you I don't know, you refine, I don't know, furniture, whatever it is. What is it that you do? And one of the businesses that I've been and I'm going to move a little bit to beauty. It's the beauty counter based in America. I love like how they're just like so purpose driven, and the idea behind their business is just, you know, just delivering clean beauty to people, you know, clean beauty to their consumers, you know. So they're really scrutinizing each and every ingredient that goes in there, you know. And you can also look at, I mean, they're not really necessarily a business. I think they're like a non-profit, the EWG, in the beauty space, that are just like, you know, educating all of us. It's almost as if like they just came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden we're knowing about, you know, what parabens are, what, you know, sulfates are, and all those things that are not supposed to be in our beauty. And I've just been so fascinated and scared all of a sudden to shop for beauty because I don't know what's in there, you know. And then you come to South Africa and you see a brand like Faithful to Nature, you know, and how amazing they've been. And their CEO was on IG Live the other day, and she was talking about how challenging it was in the beginning, you know, when she came into the space, and almost people didn't believe that we can have like cleaner products, you know. And I think when you look at it in terms of food and beauty, it makes it even more challenging, because it's like, then if you don't sell this and it has all these clean ingredients, then what's in there? Like, how else can you make cereal, you know, if it's not, you know, the way we know how cereal is? So I think those are the business models that I can just almost give an example about when I say purpose-driven businesses, where what you do every day is bigger than the course, you know, it's bigger than what we could have imagined 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you know. And I think another thing that I wanted to say, it's when Radwana was talking about, I can't remember what you were saying, but something that also came up with this whole purpose-driven businesses is that the problem is that then we can't have like sustainability police. It's like you want to have all these new models, but we need to give people space, to almost find themselves. Yes, I think this is when she was talking about, sustainability is different to everyone in a way, that for some people could mean like for people, you are focusing on your people at this point in time. You want people to be happier, you want healthier, and that's sustainability to you. That's how you're introducing a new business model, but it may not be perhaps, cool enough for other people. The other people, they may just feel that, but your business needs to produce something else. What else can you show us that is sustainable? Are you cutting down on water? Are you cutting down on electricity? Whatever it is. So it's almost like we can't police each other for these new business models to flourish and come to fruition. We need to almost give people space to define it the way they understand it.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'm seeing a lot how you guys are looking very deep into the value chain of the business, how it is being translated to the society, how everything is being produced. So on that point, Laura, can I perhaps give over to you? I would love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. So I think that, and I really like that the concept of like one of the highlights of this conversation of like repairing. Like I want to go along the lines of like repairing services, because I think sometimes we do tend to underestimate these businesses that have been for like many years, much before like fast fashion or any, like I think probably because of fast fashion, we've been losing these skills and more and also the appreciation for like repairing is very much there, because once you have like either you get rid of something and you buy something new, or you keep something for longer, and like it's very different, two parts of the coin. And I think that just like making sure that we can enhance and create this long-term value of like things, regain and have appreciation for what we have, even if it's not, doesn't have to be the most expensive garment, like, but it's just like if you already have it, make sure that you can find, like, even I think this morning with Sarah we were having a conversation about like her mom keeping shoes for like ages and like bringing them to repair services, which is something that we've seen generation through generations. And I think that there's so much value and creativity in it, because I think we tend to, again, underestimate that things can shape. And I once read about a company, I think, that they were experimenting with like, a different way of upcycling. So coming from like a garment that was like almost like a white canvas, they were turning and dyeing it in different colors, like reshaping it. So it was almost like having 5 garments in one throughout, the lifespan of maybe like 20 years. So I think there's so much potential in working with the things that we already have. So if brands could, try, I mean, thinking of like big brands, like trying pilot projects, or in a smaller scale in which we can, connect this ecosystem of like consumers bringing clothes, and the understanding that they can, have a new cloth out of what they already own. I think there's so much excitement and appreciation and value in this. And it's very different when you have something unique and sort of tailored for you than when you have something that you've seen it everywhere. And I think there's a magical aspect of it that we should certainly value.
Thanks, Laura. It actually makes me so excited hearing that input as well. And from listening to all of you, I've heard a lot of going into a circular design, changing the supply chain, but we need to give space for development in the industry for brands, and also space for the consumer to become educated on this front. And then something that you also mentioned was now that reuse principle. So having those services of reusing, repairing used items, to almost use that in your consumption, and also contributing to creating that circular design as well. I'm not sure, do any of you guys have anything you would like to add onto that?
Sorry, I'll jump in. I think we also haven't touched on too much the role of sometimes of technology as well, just even something like digital prototyping to give a more tangible solution other than the high level things that we've sort of said about defining what does success look like. But even what does digital prototyping mean if we don't have to actually cut garments and waste in that kind of process? So how can we, I sometimes think we focus too much on, and technology is the silver bullet to where we are, but just come back to it and be like, these things work hand in hand of, yes, we need to redefine value. Yes, we need to work with consumers, but also how can we add efficiencies in the long run that will help us reduce waste? Because that can be a very powerful tool of profitability, you know, that business perhaps can more easily get hold of as well. So I think technology definitely, and designers, again, part of the work that we do is talking about designers of the future, and designers of the future are very much within this 3D prototyping, something that Laura's really been doing quite a lot of. So what skills can we build in now as well for that future, for doing things more efficiently? Yeah, it's a really important part of the conversation as well.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm actually so happy that you brought that up, because we are in the midst of the fifth industrial revolution and what that brings to us. And with the fifth industrial revolution, we are starting to look more of how the human and the machine can come together, how they can embrace each other to develop and get to that innovative design. So I do think that's a critical step for us as well, to embrace that coexistence and collaboration between mind and machine and human and machine, to get to implementing sustainability traits within our brands, within our consumer mindsets as well. So I'm really happy that you brought it up, and I would love to almost touch on Laura as well with your prototyping, to just share that with us as well.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities when it comes to, you know, using these tools, and there's more and more there's been recently like a revolution and like more access to these tools, whereas like in the past, when I was even like not long ago, like still in my studies, I think we were not yet there. And even though many people were interested in, you know, finding new ways of creating even like patterns, because there's also a lot of ways in when like creating patterns and trying to be more like creative with pattern making, I see that there's no only a lot of room for creativity for a designer, but also for like designer being able to connect the dots within the supply chain. So like to be able to make sure that the language from the very beginning to the very end, it remains the same, or at least it's, you know, easier to not things get lost in the way. So and again, there's so much innovation that we can do with this, like from sharing patterns online. There's like the knitting community online is very strong, like sharing patterns, being creative with, like, you know, once you have a design, you can update it, make changes, and like someone else will, you know, can create something on top of what you've already done. And again, we doesn't really like, there's also a big movement right now of like digital fashion houses taking the lead and creating a new space with the, you know, like AI in place, and like just creating non-tangible, like non-physical garments. So that's of course a different environment, but again, the tools out there and me like playing around, experimenting, I think it's very useful and very funny, like, and also it also more and more, I think they're going, these software companies are going to integrate more and more ways by which we can, by the very end, see the different steps, and like how you know, how the amount of waste that we could reduce, as well as like, you know, what perhaps even what fabrics but might be more environmentally friendly. So I think these companies are going to adjust to where we at and where we aiming to be in the next couple of years. And we'll see more and more like growth in this space.
Thanks, Laura, for that share. And I do definitely agree with you that we are moving into this digital space and we need to embrace that space. And we can definitely see how prototyping in the digital space will decrease that waste, because that physical product is not just being diminished and pushed into fashion pollution and fashion waste and product waste as well. And we are seeing that shift in our consumers as well for embracing digital fashion. So it might be a very critical step for us to embrace that. And like we previously said at the beginning of the session, the metaverse, they are starting to publish articles on how that will ensure a more, they're calling it the betterverse, so that more ecological space for our consumers to exist. So perhaps we can use that platform to educate our customers when we want to move into this more circular design of supply chain, almost occupying them in that digital space while brands are working and developing on their supply chain. So thank you so much for that. To our other panelists, would you like to add on to what Laura said?
I'll jump in with like just a 5-second thought. I think that it's really, firstly, thanks for not mentioning all the digital fashion that keeps on touting itself as the more eco-friendly version of fashion, because I'm just like, so what, are you sitting naked behind your computer? Like, what the heck? It doesn't make sense. And also, like, if we have to measure the energy cost for running the, like, for example, your digital fashion, it doesn't make sense. We're still living in a real world. However, when I was working in China about 4 years ago, they'd already like worked out the garment prototyping, the sampling, digital sampling. They've got it down to a fine art. And I have a friend who works at Li and Fang, and she has been doing this for a really long time, and they've literally cut down their production sampling waste by more than 80% due to just having amazing designers churn out all these designs in a digital space. And I mean, my mind was completely blown. So we tried to interpose this with footwear. And it's a little bit more challenging because it is, you know, everyone's foot's quite unique. So you know, I think there's work to be done in the footwear space. But I'm really happy to hear that from an SA point of view, this is something that we're finally looking at, because sampling waste it's a real issue. And yeah, I really do think so.
Thanks, Radwana, for that input. Sarah, yes.
Right, I just want to respond to that. I know that TFG have started to embrace that within their design teams and are scaling that out. So yeah, we do have retailers that are putting that into practice, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say I fully agree. And I think that it's so important, also considering the fact that the idea about zero waste doesn't exist, right? So what is zero waste, you know? So that comes in very handy in us actually like circumventing that.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to have a look at the chat box for us again to just see if there are any questions. I see some great comments that are being made. Arabella saying that she loves the idea of repairing services, example Patagonia, value-added service, which could increase brand loyalty and maybe encourage brands to have in-store repairing stations. I think this links a lot to what you said, Radwana, with that repairing, and Laura with the reuse and repurposing of items as well. So in total, guys, I don't see any questions yet. So I almost want to couple it up a bit and summarize what we have said. So looking at our overall view of a localized fashion sustainability, how to achieve that, there's a lot of talk about just giving that space of development. We need to think about and sit back and really ask the question of, what does sustainability mean for brands? Is it just being used as a buzzword, or are we truly incorporating these circularity traits, reusing, repurposing, and also contributing to changing the mindsets and educating our society as well? Because I do think that they are depending on that education side of the sustainable development goals to get on track of where we want to go. First, we need to understand where we are at before we can move forward. So if there are any last comments from the panelists before I say good night and end this session. Well, then, thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to our audience. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Radwana. Your insights and knowledge added great value to this topic. And I really hope that this is just the start of this conversation. I think we touched a lot on the different sectors that we can still get a discussion going. And then I would just really like to remind everyone that if you didn't miss anything of the session, we will share this with you as well. And I hope that everyone has a great evening and that your minds are now prickled on to really question where we are at and how we can further achieve sustainability in our local environments. Thank you so much, guys. The audience also really appreciates your input and your inspirational words.
Thank you.
Thank you